Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome on behalf of MBIE and Westpac to the latest in our Westpac Smarts series today on e-invoicing. So welcome. My name is Reuben Tucker. I'm Managing Director of Institutional and Business Banking here at Westpac. And we are very proud for over 3 decades to be in the government banker. It's a role we take very seriously, and over the last few years we've been trying to work out some of these big meaty challenges that the government's facing into, where they've particularly asked the private sector to step up and the role we can play in trying to make that happen. And e-invoicing is right at the centre of this, really important initiative. So it's about digitising the New Zealand economy. It's about eliminating fraud, particularly invoice fraud, which is still as big a thing today as it ever has been. It's about building real strength into your supply chains. Importantly, it's about speeding up the working capital cycle, particularly for small to mid-sized businesses. At the end of the day, it maps into this big thing called productivity, just making us more productive. And we believe, we understand that if we do this well, we could find just over 4 billion in productivity gains in the economy in the next 10 years if we get it right. So big topic, and we have the Minister here today, which we're very pleased with indeed, and it's a privilege to have you here. So look, Chris Penk probably doesn't need too much of an introduction. He is an Aucklander. In fact, he's a West Aucklander, true Westie. Drove here himself, parked downstairs in the car park, look, he's been a lawyer. He's been a naval officer, now a key minister, and a key minister to us in a lot of these key big projects going forward. So I'm sure a life on the high sea sets you up well for the ups and downs of political life. And in some ways, this is an easy project because there's upside and a lot of it. But we're very pleased to have him here, and I'll hand over to him to kick us off.
Kia ora, good afternoon, and what a great honour and pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks, Reuben. As you've quite rightly noted, Westpac is the government banker, and I do want to thank you for that. In the partnership between government and business, including through its own banking systems, is very relevant to the question of e-invoicing. It's not often, as a member of the National-led coalition government, I'm that happy to be in front of a big red logo, but I do actually want to make a point of thanking Westpac for its leadership, between yourself and your customers who are all here, and just want to, acknowledge every one of you from your respective different industries, large, medium, small, all crucially important, of course, to the social and economic fabric of the nation, and the fact that you've taken out your time today to be with us all and to hear, but also importantly to speak and know that I'm here in a spirit of wanting to listen and hear from you what's important to you, means a lot. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Thanks for the partnership. Thanks for the conversation. It is, a really exciting space. I'll keep my opening remarks really brief. I'm pleased that people who are more knowledgeable than me will be joining on stage shortly. So on that note, I do want to also acknowledge our team from MBIE, Roshan and Lisa from up here in Auckland, as well as Michael, Alan, and Michaela, probably others as well. I've done that classic mistake of starting to mention names. If you don't mention them all, you'll be in trouble. So I'll find out later. But I'm really pleased to have been here. I was up in Snells Beach earlier, which is within my electorate, coming down a motorway that became 110k maximum today. So actually I was able to do that legally. So it is nice to be here. And I do just want to note that I was on time accordingly. But obviously, look, really important subject, as you all know. I suspect the fact that you're in the room means that I'm probably preaching to the choir to some extent. But for those of you who are new on the journey or further along or about to implement, and I've actually discussed it as it happens, just briefly in the time that we had available before the formal part of the session, different firms who are different places along that journey. It seems to me that you're doing something that will be good for your own businesses, of course, but naturally for the New Zealand economy more generally. And of course, we talk about the New Zealand economy as though it's really important. It is, but not just obviously in a dollars and cents kind of way. And I'm sure even, being here in a bank, Reuben and his team, who again, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be with today, would acknowledge, these are people's lives, whether they're running a small business, so much on the line from that point of view, medium or large, crucial part in the supply chain, the goods and services throughout New Zealand, the export dollars for those who are getting those dollars and other currencies off seas, And of course, from a government point of view, the efficiency of the systems by which people are paid and contribute to the tax take enables us to spend money on health and education and other services that Kiwis deserve and expect. In terms of e-invoicing specifically, and in my brief remaining time before I look forward to hearing from others and getting involved in that discussion, I do want to sort of focus on three different elements. One is who, one is when, and one is why. And I'll do it in reverse order because the why is so important. Again, acknowledging that many of you in the room will be well aware of the why. And I'll leave the what to my learned colleagues from MBIE, which is the relevant government agency, I should add. In terms of the why, from a government point of view, we understand that time is money, and we understand that productivity, as Reuben quite rightly noted, is the key thing if we're going to get that economic growth. And the government can pass budgets and pass laws and add or reduce regulation as they see fit to try to enable productivity and growth. But the reality is it's out there in the real world. I'm not saying government's not the real world, necessarily, but it's out there in the real world that these transactions add up over time. And if we've got to a place, for example, where 40,000 monthly transactions are e-invoiced as opposed to 10,000, as I understand was the case 6 months ago, then that's a huge productivity gain for New Zealand. That's important within our shores, of course, and to be competitive as compared with our competitors and friends and allies and trading partners overseas is of course crucially important because we are in competition. Let's be honest, we're in competition with Australia and other countries, and to the extent that others overseas, and I suspect this is a discussion we'll have, are more forward-leaning than New Zealand has been until now, then that's a challenge but also an opportunity for us to get up there. So that's the why. It's about productivity, and as Reuben's already rightly noted again, in relation to reducing fraud, which is of course important. In terms of who, I do want to emphasise that this is a government project with a capital G for government, very much a non-partisan matter. It's not a matter of party policy for one or t'other. Actually, the key point there is really that it's being led by MBIE. So the government agency having that continuity, having a really smart, focused, dedicated team driving that, and from my point of view as a relatively new minister in the space, knowing that others have done great work beforehand and will continue that on is really important because it's going to take a while. So the who is about both those arms of government, obviously through its partners, and there are a lot of there's bankers and lawyers and others who help us do the transactions, give us advice. But of course, the real partnership is understanding what the New Zealand economy needs, small, medium and large businesses from Northland to Southland and other islands, who, as this has been recorded, I should mention in case you're watching, to the extent that the internet connection on the Chatham Islands allows. And just know that, from our point of view, that's really important. We know that's where the huge gains are to be made. On that note, though, of course, the government is itself a major player in the sense of procuring a lot of services. And so we'll hear a bit more detail, I think, in a moment from our colleagues and friends of MBIE, what the government can do in addition to regulatory settings, but as a procurer of services in its own right. And by the way, there's probably a further conversation about how local government can help get on board with that too, and that's a conversation I'm starting to have with the local government minister to see if the central government procurement rules that we're currently amending, including to push in this direction, can also apply, for every city, district and regional council across the country. That'll be particularly important, I think, for small businesses. So having said the why, and the who. As for the when, well, obviously this is an ongoing project, and you can see the graphs of the uptake, and there are a lot of different factors that go into that. But suffice to say, at the risk of cliche, we're on a journey, but it's a journey in the right direction, and I thank you all for being part of it. So on that note, I'll leave the stage now, hand back to Reuben and co. But just again, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Look forward to the conversations we go through. Cheers.
Thank you, Minister. And look, a really good point around the bipartisan approach to this. Why is it? Because it makes abundant good sense. And so the way we should approach this is something that's going to happen and will be an enduring feature of New Zealand's, if not the world's, economic landscape going forward. So maybe just start with a quick show of hands. Who feels they're at a level of familiarity with e-invoicing that they could deliver a stage 3 university lecture on it? Well, yeah. So strangely enough, we do have a few people here who can, and I wouldn't mind asking to the stage Alan Carnaby, who's been a whole lot of the passion within MBIE around this project. What he doesn't know about this topic is not worth knowing. The energy he brings to the role is such that on the race here this morning through the airport, he completely ripped his suit, so this is a brand new suit. But he's here to give us a quick 101, and then we'll go into the panel session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reuben, and thanks for adding that in. And Minister, really, really good remarks. You certainly got the e-invoicing talk track down packed, so that was brilliant. And look, I just want to provide a bit of an e-invoicing 101 here for people. Can I actually see a show of hands who actually knows e-invoicing to the extent of it's beyond an email PDF? Okay, that's a good start, because the e-invoicing term, if we had to go and rebrand it, we probably would. Unfortunately, it's a global phenomenon, and that is the term for e-invoicing. But what we're talking about with e-invoicing is a direct exchange of invoice data from one system to another, regardless of those systems. And we're using one network standard for all of New Zealand. And so what that really means is no more PDFs, no more email as the channel that you send it via, no more private island systems that work well for some organisations and not so well for others, and doing invoicing in one way for all New Zealand business that's also interoperable with other countries around the world. And this is really important because when you look at invoicing in the state of New Zealand today, the average small business spends 6 hours a month on manual invoicing processes. So that's nearly 2 weeks a year on plugging in, scraping PDFs, plugging in invoice data into your system, whether that's a Xero, MYB, that kind of thing. Some more stats. The average payment time to a small business is 23 days, 23.3 days to be in fact. And so e-invoicing can also help speed up payments. So no longer do you have invoices sitting in someone's email inbox or getting lost. You cannot lose an e-invoice. Transparency the whole way through, and you're not waiting to get paid because someone's gone on holiday and hasn't forwarded on the invoice, right? And then the other thing is around fraud reduction. So with e-invoicing, again, I mentioned direct system-to-system exchange of the data. That data is encrypted in transit, and it pretty much eliminates invoice fraud. Now, the other stat, which is probably the most telling, is that we send 280 million of these invoice documents to each other every year, business to business. That's quite a few. And so when you add up all of that time, we're wasting a lot of it, and we need to unlock that human capital for our economy. And we're going to do that with e-invoicing. So if we do, and if we all move to e-invoicing as businesses, like Reuben mentioned, about 4.4 billion over 10 years, Look, we think that's actually pretty conservative as a productivity number. So when we look at the likes of Norway at the moment, nearly 80% of all business invoices in Norway go through their one e-invoicing network. And I can't remember, Michael, you had a number, it might be around 0.5% or nearly up to 1% of GDP productivity gain for Norway today. That's happening right now. So there is a blueprint for this. It is being done overseas. And so that is a big prize. And then along with the invoice fraud reduction, which we're trying to get some calculations on, we can at least see right now, from what we know, about 20 to 30 million invoice fraud every year being eliminated. And that's just what's reported in terms of invoice fraud. A lot of it's happening unbeknownst to organisations or unreported for that matter. And so we've got this model of what we can do for our country here, and what I see as a key pillar of driving a smart digital and data economy. But the good news is we're actually growing this really well at the moment. So 50,000 businesses are on board with e-invoicing, or 52,000 businesses, I think, today, with e-invoicing today. They're registered, they're on the network. I think the Minister had some really good stats, 40,000 transactions or so a month at the moment, so that's nearly 500,000 a year. But we've still got a way to go. I mentioned the 280 million invoices a year, so we've still got some volume to get there, right, in terms of getting the uplift where it needs to be. But we also have 60 or so software products in New Zealand that now provide e-invoicing capability as part of their solution. And there's more to go. I even found out about another one today, which Lisa and I will follow up on. But most software providers here in New Zealand in accountancy, finance are providing e-invoicing solutions in their products. And that includes the likes of Xero and MYB, who provide free and native access today to all of their small business customers. So that essentially covers about 80% of New Zealand businesses in terms of that coverage, which is really, really good. And the other thing is government agencies. So we've got 45 New Zealand government agencies that are live with e-invoicing today, and more are coming on board, and I'll talk in a minute about procurement rules. That includes MBIE, so if you do work with government, you may have heard about it through that. But that is a key driver for us in how we're going to drive uptake. And then In the private sector, it's great. We have Westpac hosting, and thank you very much again, Reuben. We have organisations like Westpac who are live receiving e-invoices. Bunnings just went recently live with sending e-invoices, approximately 20,000 a month to 2,500 businesses, and that's climbing every month now. We have the likes of Datacom, Fonterra, and some really big organisations, Spark, One New Zealand, all getting on board with this. So we're getting momentum right across large business, government, the software providers, and then the other piece to all of this is international momentum. So there are 42 other countries that are rolling out the sort of same project as us, PEPAL e-invoicing. Now, they're at various different stages. New Zealand's going well in terms of growth, but some of them are further along than we are, and they're actually mandating e-invoicing from a business-to-business perspective in their economy. So there is a lot of international momentum and growth. So it's great that you're listening to us here, but if you're working overseas exporting, you're going to have to do this in a lot of other jurisdictions. That includes Singapore, Malaysia, a host of countries in Europe. And we also work really closely with the Australian Taxation Office in Australia on this initiative. So we're rolling this out hand in hand with them and have a great partnership. So a lot of international momentum, domestic momentum, but we want to go faster. So we need to get to what we call critical mass for this initiative. So when we talk about volumes, 280 million, and what we call critical mass, or what you call the network effect, that's typically about 15 to 20% of your target, or what addressable market, if you like, that you want to get to before the initiative has enough steam on its own that it just becomes the new norm of doing things. So we need to be getting up to about 3 to 4 million transactions a month through our network before we actually hit that critical mass network effect. So we've got a way to go, and we want to get there quickly. And so what we've put in place at the end of last year is, first of all, some requirements on government agencies. So through the New Zealand government procurement rules, and Michael can talk to you a bit more about that, all New Zealand agencies that send or receive over 2,000 invoices a year have to be send and receive e-invoicing capable by the 1st of January next year. Not long. They also have to prioritise paying an e-invoice in 5 working days by 1st of January next year. And they'll be reporting on that, and we will be publishing their performance against that target on the MBIE website. So that's to act as a bit of a cash flow incentive to get sending e-invoices to government. So this is now happening. We're having a lot of conversations with agencies. A few of them are scrambling a little bit, but it's nothing like a good deadline to get them moving, and we're starting to see a real shift. So if you're working with government here, you'll hear a lot more about this over the next 6 months. And the other thing that we've recently publicly consulted on is, should there be a procurement rule for large government suppliers to send e-invoices to government? So that's a requirement to send e-invoices to government if you work with them. So that's gone through a public consultation. There's some further work and policy work behind the scenes, but that's something you'll probably look to hear more on in the coming months. And that's to, again, help to spur on the adoption, make it the default way of doing things. And so that's currently under discussion, but all signs are pointing to trying to make it the default way of working, and that'll certainly aid the growth and adoption that we need to get to. The other thing is our team are here. So Rashan, Lisa, obviously Michael, but we have a whole host of people in Wellington as well. We are here to help you on your journey. There are a number of different implementation pathways. Becoming e-invoicing enabled doesn't just require you to upgrade your big legacy ERP system like an SAP or Oracle, which can be pretty chunky and take a bit of time. There are other options that are a lot more affordable that can get you going, and we can provide some really good independent advice on how you can do that. We have a technology manager, we have a change resource and that kind of stuff, so we can provide a lot of good advice because we've seen hundreds of these implementations across large businesses. And whilst your environment might be unique, you might have some unique challenges, chances are we'll have come across similar problems and we can provide some good advice on that. So my message would be, talk to us, use us, we're at your service, and we'd love to help you get on your journey. And that would be my intro. Thanks, Reuben.
I'll ask the panel to come up. So, Minister We also have Steven Pearson, the General Manager of DataPrint, and Michael Alp, the recently retitled GM of Government Procurement. Minister, you've been a huge advocate for e-invoicing. It's been a key initiative for your government. Where does it fit inside a broader range of policies looking to drive better outcomes for small business and productivity?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've certainly been lucky to come into a role where there's been a lot of momentum created already by MB, but certainly to me it seems a no-brainer, and without harkening back too much to that point about non-partisanship, it seems to me an idea whose time has come, and it's very difficult to argue against. And part of the reason is because it is a move towards greater digitisation, both of government and the private sector. And so in that context, it does fit neatly into ways that we're trying to make it easier for people to do business. And I do mean business with a capital B, but also, in terms of the economy and society more generally. I mean, I've mentioned small, medium, large businesses, but also the charitable sector, of course. They're even more in a way with huge emphasis on volunteer hours and their vulnerability to people spending time unnecessarily. So with initiatives like the NZBN, or New Zealand Business Number expansion, and thinking about ways that can be expanded across government, or rather, by government, but across the rest of society, as well as the government being a good partner in procuring ways. So, and there's a number of other ways that we think that digitisation, whether led by the sector or encouraged by government, or even, maybe a bit more edgy, and I'm conscious it's being recorded, but mandating as well is something that we do need to consider. We hesitate in a way to mandate systems that would add regulation or be more prescriptive, but there's an interesting discussion you have when being more prescriptive is actually, and on the face of it, adding regulation is actually making life easier, not harder. So I think there's a really important conversation to take place, not only in terms of e-invoicing, but also NZBN and other ways in which we're looking to encourage people online to do life better.
We touched in the introduction on Norway, and there are a number of countries globally doing this very well. Who would you look to as models for how to play this out?
I mean, I think a good idea anywhere on the globe is one that would be interested to pick up. I mean, Norway and other Scandinavian countries famously, do business and government well. I think an obvious place to start would be interoperability with Australia, and there would be firms large and small within this room who do business within Australia or have a parent company in Australia or elsewhere within Asia. And Australia is an obvious point, I guess, given closer economic relations and other ways in which we need to partner really, and already do in fact partner directly with them. So anywhere I think we could get out a map of the world and be quite specific. But I think the point is anyone who's doing those things well that we interact with, will give us opportunities to learn from them. Right. I'm interested in copying homework, basically. If other countries are doing it well, why would we reinvent the wheel?
Big bro steel.
Yeah.
Michael, MBIE's been right at the centre of this initiative. It's been a passion project for a number of you. Alan talked about this tipping point we're going to get to. It suddenly crowds in everyone. It just becomes just part of doing business. What are the initiatives and programs that MBIE have been running to try and accelerate that mass adoption?
Yeah, good question. So a couple of things. So we've been doing this for about 5 years now, and within that period of time we've looked at sort of what the best way for engagement has been. So one of the first things we thought about was you have to consume what you cook, and therefore government started with government. So we did a lot of work with the CFO network across government to kind of test out a lot of these things to say what would be our own roadblocks and how we go about this. And that was really helpful. From there, our team ran a number of community of practice workshops, and we've got a really good community of practice group that's running at the moment, which we always welcome new members on, and that's across the private sector. From there we built up to what we call the E-invoicing Leaders Adoption Group, and what that is CFOs from across large business within New Zealand. And the pleasing thing is, Reuben, you co-chair that group with me at the moment, but in the room we've got Reuben, we've got a CFO from ANZ, we've got a CFO or exec member from BNZ. And the beautiful thing about all of that is it means that large businesses putting aside their differences, are thinking about how do we make this thing work for New Zealand businesses and more importantly small businesses. And one of our big pushes on that in driving large business was thinking about what the supply chain was and how they could influence. So if you think about a Pack and Save or a Woolworths Group or whatever, when you get 3,000 to 5,000 plus of suppliers, the positive influence and system leadership that they can play through. So been trying to think about that at that big level, but as Alan touched on earlier, we also work closely with the Australian Tax Office. So we have what's called the the Australian-New Zealand E-invoicing Board, which I co-chair with a Deputy Commissioner from the ATO, and we're beginning to think about what the Minister's talked about is trans-Tasman business and how we can focus on those areas.
What do you think the obstacles are real and perceived to mass adoption?
Real is ensuring that change management processes are in place. So that's sort of, and just getting a standard set of data too, and the information that you want to report on, but also bringing the team along the way. So whether it's a AP team, a systems team, whatever it is, and just realising it's not difficult. And interestingly, we had a case study through Xero themselves, and when they started doing e-invoicing themselves, their team actually hadn't noticed they had started to do it. And it was a good example to say it doesn't have to be difficult if you just set these things up right. But I think there's also some real obstacles in ensuring that some of the other system providers, ERP providers, are making it as easy as possible as well. So as government, we've got a good voice in influencing that, but the best possible thing is if we hear of any issues that any organisations are having, is having those organisations come on board and join us with the conversations with the ERP providers so it can be repeatable, reusable and as efficient as possible, because the cost savings are up to $30 an invoice roughly by international standards, so it's a huge prize if we get it right.
What's your assessment of where we're at? Are we on time, behind time, ahead of time?
Pretty average overall. I mean, I think we've done a fantastic job in terms of getting people enabled, 50,000 plus businesses, so that's just over 12% of businesses in New Zealand. So I think the rest will start to follow as we go through, but it's really getting traffic through the system. And again, I think the best thing is working with large organisations to start to get volume of invoices through and working through the supply chain.
So we'll move from banking government to the real world, an actual business. Stephen, you're quite well down the curve with adoption at DataPrint. And what are the advantages that you've seen from a financial management perspective, particularly with respect to managing your cash flow, your working capital? What's the size of the prize for the people in the audience to think about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we're noticing at the moment is the actual deliverable. I know in our own businesses we're always talked about the digital saturation, don't open up emails, don't click on links. So we're seeing the deliverable factor come through a lot heavier now. The secure side of it is what a lot of people are, I guess, a lot more concerned about. So the financial one is actually the invoices getting through. I think we touched on it before, not getting put into junk mail or being treated as spam or being concerned about in any way or going on holiday. The invoices are straight through. The other side of it was that we're noticing is it's not even the sender, the seller so much, talking to tradies and things like that. But what we're finding with them is they're saying that their time is valuable. So a lot of these guys are on their own, running their own businesses, and they're spending a Sunday, for example, having to sit down and spend the whole day. What they're finding now is the actual sellers getting the e-invoicing through are actually finding they're getting their time back. Their time is becoming a lot more valuable, and spending it on simple things like family can be probably the most valuable thing that they're finding at the moment. So that financial factor that we're definitely finding at the moment is the trust, breaking down those barriers of concern and making sure that we're able to help them on that journey of deliverable.
Great.
One of the odd things we've got in New Zealand and unique factors is 50% of small businesses do not have a finance management system or a software package. So they're either doing manual invoices, doing something in Excel and printing that out. So, I think adoption, we still have to kind of get through that technology hurdle, and that's something else to think about.
And on that, Stephen, what are the, given your experience, I'm sure there's some stumbles on the way to getting it right. What would your advice be to people in the audience looking at this from ground zero? What are the next steps to get e-invoicing moving?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is not getting stuck into the details. So we've come across a few businesses that really want to dive in and understand it. I think one of the best ways I was explained at the very beginning stages is no different to a Visa card or a credit card. All these transactions happen, all the stuff happens in between. We don't need to know about all the detail of which bank and how it all works and everything like that. It's about sitting down with the right people, having the right journey, and making sure that they are understanding where you are in that journey, and then supporting you through it. So the technology piece isn't something to be concerned about. Even for myself, I'm not the technical side of it, but the journey is something easy for us to walk through. Depending on where you are, we've gone through that journey, responsible for over half of the e-invoicing in New Zealand at the moment, and the first e-invoicing into the government. So we've been through quite a few journeys ourselves, and the same sort of thing where it's about partnering with someone and not being afraid of what this next, journey looks like. And the big one that we are talking about is just, that scam, the security, and knowing that this is a path, a true adopted path that's proven itself overseas. So it isn't something to be concerned about or worried about.
We're in a very interesting world in terms of global trade, but to what extent, particularly with key partners starting with Australia, should we be thinking about e-invoicing being an alternative to a process of facilitating cross-border movements of goods and money that hasn't changed in about 300 years?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so we've got Freightways New Zealand, Freightways Australia.
Yep.
So we're definitely interested in what both sides are doing. Yep. We can see Australia is quite far ahead, and we definitely watch their space quite heavily as to why we wanted to be an early adopter into this from our perspective. But we're also looking at what does that look like between the two countries with that cross-Tasman.
Yeah, if I could just observe, I mean, obviously, global trade has been a large topic in a sensitive one at that in 2025, but the long arc of history is definitely towards, greater movement of people and goods and services. It seems to me that, it's inevitable now that all new free trade agreements at a bilateral or multilateral level will include chapters on e-commerce more generally, including e-invoicing. So I think that's really positive. Our colleagues and friends at MFAT, who've got really good negotiators in this space, are well aware of that and the importance of that to New Zealand. So not least of all, to make the obvious point that we're long distance at the end of supply chains globally, to do things in a weightless and electronic way is, frankly, in our interest, and so, as well as for all the other reasons that we've discussed. So I'm really optimistic that we'll be able to continue to push things in the right direction on the trade level as well.
Great. Michael, Australia's the most obvious place to start. There's some targets we could start setting around the invoicing trade with Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. So we meet with our Australian counterparts every 3 or 4 months, and we just alternate between Australia and New Zealand. In July, we've got a delegation coming across, actually both from Australia and Singapore, to look at what we've done over here. And really, I think the whole APAC relationship has been really good in terms of testing these things, and got a really fantastic story actually. So quite recently, Toyota Corporation, massive corporation, clearly, globally, contacted the Japanese digital agency, who are our equivalent in Japan, and said, we're here, New Zealand's doing good things in the e-invoicing space, go and have a look at it. And about 2 weeks ago, we hosted a delegation from Japanese government and a lot of businesses too. So I think we've got some really good momentum in how we're going about this. And yes, Australia is absolutely first and foremost, but a lot we can learn from our other APAC partners.
Yeah. Minister, we're in a world of changing supply chain disruption. We've had various chapters in the last 5 years, and New Zealand business has been very nimble working around that. How important do you see invoicing as part of that process of strengthening New Zealand's supply chains, both domestic on the ground and potentially cross-border?
Yeah, I mean, hugely important, obviously. I mean, just general productivity at this end of the equation, even without the trading elements that get very deep and detailed in terms of tariff and non-tariff barriers. If we can, do everything within our power to make New Zealand businesses as productive as possible, then we'll give them, extra leeway to be able to have those conversations where they're literally seeking out new horizons. So, as I say, I mean, there's a good level of awareness at MFAT. Last year I was randomly but fortunately able to be part of the APEC Trade Ministers Forum in Peru, of all places, and I'm not usually anything to do with the trade portfolio, so it just was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And actually it was really interesting how prominent within those discussions e-commerce generally, and obviously invoicing is a subset but an important one of that, is in front of mind for people, including in the global world in which we live, questions of fraud as it's been discussed in a domestic context, and banks obviously very aware, but government no less so, about the ways that we can mitigate the risk that someone who's not only so far out of sight as to be to all intents and purposes unreachable, but particularly when you get into that cross-jurisdictional stuff where it's not even clear that you'd have the practical or the legal ability, let alone the practical ability to bring someone to New Zealand court in the event of fraud. So, huge premium place on it from that point of view too. Yeah.
Stephen, from the perspective of your supply chain and the conversations you've been having with your suppliers, how do you see your supply chain strengthened through use of e-invoicing?
For most of it, it looks to be like about breaking down those barriers and opening up the walls again, bringing down those walls. But I guess what most of the areas we're sort of looking at for ours is between New Zealand and Australia. And I think the connection is definitely starting to become more apparent, definitely from the New Zealand side, as to what we can do, what are the opportunities that might actually open, and then being able to have the connection for that e-invoicing, costing, charging, and breaking down those barriers as well.
Minister, you've touched on use of the NZBN. Identity is a big topic at the moment, both at the level of the individual, the consumer, but also the business. Dream state would be you've got your NZBN linked to a verified bank account, and then you almost eliminate the instance of invoice fraud. What else can we use the NZBN for?
I mean, the possibilities are limitless, really. I mean, the technical element of where exactly it can be expanded would be better answered by colleagues from MB. But I think, from a government perspective, if we're trying to be, for example, enabling in the space of building and construction, which is a passion of mine. Well, it's a portfolio of mine as well, but also a passion, helpfully, and thinking about the ways that construction sector, pays itself in terms of, main contractors and subcontractors and sub-subcontractors and so on, with or without government involved, by the way. It's clear that we need to have good systems in place whereby we can't have a legal entity that's got certain obligations, be it to subcontractors or to a consumer who's, having something built. If things go poorly, we don't want them to be able to turn out their pockets and walk away from their obligations. Set up shop down the road, of course, as a slightly different legal entity, and continue on merrily leaving a trail of destruction behind. And sadly, that's been too common in the past. So with the NZBN able to, provide effectively an entity for, some kind of amorphous grouping of directors or shareholders or a place deliberately that's outside, a company or a trust structure that enables us to get away with that. And that's really exciting because that means we can actually trust the responsible builders in this scenario and others to actually get on and be responsible for their own outcomes, spend less time and energy having the state or the local government look over their shoulder from a consenting point of view and the liability associated with that. So it's really exciting actually what we could do in commerce more generally if we say, here's a legal identity, outside the narrow confines and the 20th and 19th century confines of what we understand by company law and trust law, to actually say, well, actually, it's going to be really enabling for, dare I say it, the good guys and girls, and for those who would otherwise be cowboys or treat others poorly, it will be easier to crack down on them. So, there'll be a general behavioural shift that will be, frankly, helpful, I think, for the way that our economy works, with the NZBN able to sort of, play that role outside what is currently referred to as lawyers as the corporate veil.
Yes, yeah. So we've talked about the outcomes from a perspective of reducing, and ultimately we could eliminate traditional invoice fraud. The other big outcome here is getting better working capital into small to mid-sized New Zealand businesses, and we've talked a lot about how do we do that. The basic problem in New Zealand is that cash conversion cycle for many small New Zealand businesses is too slow. And so one of the things out of this whole program of work that we keep in mind too is that that is the objective. We could set up e-invoicing but still be billing way too slow or paying way too slow. How do we, and you've talked about mandating, but how do you think about getting that right? The carrot versus the stick, incentivising the right sort of behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a philosophical question, I suppose, but if we start with the why about what's at stake and what's the size of the prize, and we've heard already from on stage, but those who are on the other side of the podium at the moment will know this instinctively better than any government minister or agency will ever do, which is just that importance of access to capital, cash flow. I mean, these are the things that are frequently raised with me. If I were to write down a list of the things that I know that a Chamber of Commerce anywhere in this country is going to raise with me, access to talent, access to capital, top two every time, and obviously there's different subsets within that, but to get paid on time by those with whom they're doing business is a key one. And e-invoicing, I think, is helpful not only because it's the mechanics of the payment that do enable that to happen much more quickly, as has been very helpfully already described, but also almost that it removes the excuse. It's not lost in the post, the check's in the mail. We've all heard that expression. That'll be only, I suppose, ironically able to be used in those terms. But there's a level of accountability, I think, and a sense in which good players will be able to be recognised, respected, and win business from others within business and the world of government too, precisely because of that transparency of e-invoicing, transparency in that sense, as well as, of course, guarding against fraud with a capital F.
To finish up, just a quick fire set of questions. Start down with you, Stephen. For people who were new to e-invoicing when they stepped in here today, that are now encouraged to go out there and embrace it, what's the one thing you think they should do when they leave the room?
I think visit the website would probably be a really good starting point. But yeah, I'd come back to don't be afraid to start the journey. We're definitely seeing other business units in the building industry now realising that they're a little bit behind. So the sooner you get into it and start having the conversation, it doesn't matter if you're part way through it or just starting. It's about starting the conversations and start talking about what your journey looks like.
Michael?
Yeah, very similar thing. Encourage you just jump on the web and look it up. In addition to our website, so many great case studies. Nordics are absolutely fascinating. So Norway is 335 million per annum US productivity savings conservatively, and they're about 5 years ahead of us. So it really is doable.
Minister.
Cool. From a government perspective, I'm really excited about the different things that this could help to unlock elsewhere. So if you've got ideas about, stones in your shoe when you're operating business and you think, well, actually, if I do invoicing, maybe that can help over there, please feel free to hit me up or, send a message to MB or your local MP and it'll get to me. I mean, even as we've been talking to your point, ma'am, about interacting with overseas and verifying. I mean, if anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism, the sand in the gears of that system, if that can be, if we can grease the wheels, slightly mixing my metaphors in that way, by reference to, e-invoicing transactions that's actually able to get through and save a lot of time and energy and red tape, then to me that would be a beautiful thing. So, do challenge government to operate and update its own systems, even beyond the way that, has already been described, because I think there's a lot of more potential in this than most of us have realised till now.
There's quite a few functions that sit under MB in terms of business compliance. So anything within that space outside of taxation that is really frustrating. As the Minister says, hit him up. There's a lot of levers within a small number of groups that we can look at things across the organisation.
Thank you. Look, that's a wrap for the session, but Minister, thank you for firstly making the time.
Pleasure,
thank you. Incredibly busy schedule, and the fact that you've given us so much time tells us all how important this is. Michael, thank you for all the work you do and lead at MB. Again, it's one of these weird things where it's government driving the way first, and the private sector's got to see what's happening around key agencies and say we're getting on top of this. And Stephen, thank you for bringing your real world stories. It can be done, and it can e-invoicing can deliver real value. So look, just to close again, if you are looking for more information, find that on the e-invoicing.gov.nz site. If you forget that, you can search it on the MB site, I think, find it pretty easily. The business-based site at Westpac has a lot of material around e-invoicing and other tools available to you as a small business, or call your exceptionally friendly Westpac banker for a chat and they can guide you in the right direction. But we hope that's been useful. It's a very new area. There's a lot of just getting people comfortable with this space, but it is going to happen. We'll have to get on top of it. Good luck. Hope it's been useful. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.